Here are 5 common mistakes low elo players make. If you're able to fix these problems, you will see a massive improvement in your gameplay. Now, before I talk about each mistake, it's important to understand that you can't fix all your flaws at once. I highly recommend you watch the entire video to see which mistakes you think you make the most, then spend 2 to 3 weeks focusing on fixing one of those specific mistakes. If you try to work on everything at once, you may not see any improvement. Speaking of improvement, let me introduce you to the sponsor of this video, the Immortal Roadmap Program. This unique program will teach you everything you need to hit Immortal Plus in 8 weeks. They're so confident in their coaching that they are the only program that offers a 5-division rank up in 8 weeks guarantee or your money back. They've helped hundreds of students hit Immortal and Radiant. Their coaching staff consists of Compeki and over a dozen Radiant coaches with professional VCT experience, such as Comet, who was an analyst on Ascend the year they won Champions in 2021, Screwface, who was the 6th man on EG when they won Champions in 2023, and Gangsta, who has played on Disguised, Immortals, and Knights. If you're interested in learning from the best of the best, then sign up fast, as only a handful of spots remain for Season 17 of their program. Let's talk about the first mistake so many low elo players make. This mistake has to do with how players react when they miss their initial shot or when they hit a body shot as their first shot. If you miss your initial shot in a tracking based game, all you need to do is readjust your crosshair to the target while still shooting your gun. So your focus is on shooting the enemy as you adjust your aim. For a lot of new players, this habit transfers over to Valorant. You see, aiming in tracking games is intuitive, but aiming in precision based games like Valorant is not. So when you miss in Valorant, there are a few extra steps you need to do before shooting your target again. You cannot keep spraying while tracking your target. Firstly, you need to rely less on spraying more than 5 bullets at a time. If you are taking a very far range gunfight, only shoot 1 to 2 bullets. If you are taking a medium range gunfight, burst around 3 to 5 bullets. Only if you are in a very close range fight can you choose to spray or run and gun. But for the purposes of this tip, I'm going to focus on the long and medium range gunfights. After shooting your initial burst of bullets and noticing you either missed or only hit body shots, the first thing you should do is stop shooting. Yeah, that sounds weird at first, but trust me, this is what's holding you back. Instead of committing to a spray, you should let your guns recoil and spray patterns reset to ensure better accuracy. That's why you should stop shooting. But because you stop shooting, you need to move so that you are not a stationary target to get shot at. So as you stop shooting, move by pressing A or D. You should only move in a perpendicular direction. As you are moving right or left, you should now be readjusting your crosshair to the enemy's head. Once your crosshair is back to their head, you should then stop moving and proceed to burst fire again. This is the concept of strafing. If you miss on your next set of shots, then proceed to do the exact same steps. Stop shooting, move either right or left while readjusting your crosshair, wait for your character to be still, and then burst fire. Now, only if you do get shot during your strafe should you try to stand still and out-aim the enemy. This is because once your character gets shot, their movement becomes significantly slower, so you have to rely on better raw aim to win that gunfight. Like I said, it's much easier to aim in a tracking-based game because you don't need to do all these extra steps. However, in Valorant, you have to compensate for the fact that there is a low time to kill, hard to control recoil, and random spray patterns. This may seem like a lot to do, but trust me, all these steps are done within seconds. If you want to practice this, then go to the range and set the bots to eliminate 50 with strafe on. Then strafe only using A or D and track the bot's head as it moves. After doing this for a few seconds, shoot the bot when it stands still. Take your time and focus on accuracy. The second mistake low elo players make is using too much utility or too little utility during a round. This is a serious problem because using utility too often or not at all can be the difference between winning and losing a round. Poor utility usage is a direct result of not knowing either where to use your utility or when to use your utility. Players who use too much utility tend to waste their abilities without taking a moment to think about what they want their utility to do or if any teammate can follow up with that utility. For example, if you throw an Omen blind but none of your teammates can push the enemy while he's blind, then the Omen blind was useless. Similarly, if you place smokes at the start of the round but your teammates can't push onto the site, then it's as if you never smoked in the first place. You may have used your utility in the right spots, but practically they made no impact. When you decide to use any utility, think about how you want that utility to give you or your team an advantage in the next gunfight. Do not just use utility and hope it has some effect. Say you play Cypher but only use the same setup and keep dying to the enemy's rush. You are wasting his utility. Instead of using the same setup to stop enemies from rushing a site, you can place kill trips specifically meant for players to hit after they enter site, so instead of having no impact, you can play to get 1 or 2 kills before dying on the site. This is an example of learning where to use utility better. Now, say you are playing Sova and only throw your dart at the start of the round, but the enemies keep breaking it and rushing your site. You are wasting his dart. Jump peeking would give you the same information that the dart does, so instead, you could save your dart for when the enemies push onto the site. Then you can throw the dart on a high wall and get easy kills as the enemies enter. This is an example of learning when to use utility correctly. On the other hand, there are players who don't use their utility at all. They will go into a round and by the time the round is almost over, they will still have all of their abilities. If you notice you are not buying your utility often, that means you are not making much impact with it. The problem is that there is so much going on in a round that some people forget that they have utility or don't know how to use it. The only way to fix this is to watch agent guide videos and then go into a game with the sole goal of using your utility effectively. If you need more help, then watch streamers play your agents and pay attention to where and when they use their utility. And if you are interested in ranking up faster, then make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and join my Discord. We're trying to get to 50,000 subscribers. The third mistake many players make is shooting before their crosshair is on target. Shooting too early is a result of panicking. You tend to shoot immediately because the person who gets the shot off first has the higher chance of winning the gunfight. I get that, but unfortunately, rushing to get the shot off first can be counterproductive. If you shoot too early, you will miss your initial shots, which are supposed to be the most accurate ones. This then causes you to spray because now you're afraid the enemy can get the first shot on you. There are a couple fixes for this. The first is that you need better passive aim. Passive aim involves good crosshair placement and peeking mechanics so that you don't need to rely on large flicks to shoot targets. I break this down in my peeking guide. Check it out if you need better passive aim and don't know how to approach angles correctly. However, you still need to work on having accurate flicks. So here's what you can do in the range. Play easy or medium bots with only the sheriff. Stand on the ledge, and when the bot spawns, flick to the bot, but take a moment to register that your crosshair is on the bot's head. Start slow and shoot only when your crosshair is on target. Keep practicing until you can get a consistent score of 29 to 30. Now in aim labs, you should work on your micro flicks. If you have good crosshair placement, then accurate micro flicks is the main area of aim that will help your first shot accuracy. 3 good tasks to do are CG adjust click micro, VT vibe shot changing, and VT multi flick. You can then take these skills into a guardian only deathmatch. Focus on good crosshair placement, peeking mechanics, and shoot only when you are on target. Yes, you will die a lot doing this, but your goal is to stop shooting early. It's not about how many kills you can get. The fourth mistake players make is not understanding the correct order of entry onto a site. This is very important but not talked about often. There is a sequence to how utility and agents should be used to enter sites. If you push into a site before it's your turn or before the correct utility has been used, then you risk throwing around. Let me explain. In low elo, there will be times where your teammates will just enter a site before any smokes are up or any initiator utility like a drone or skydog has been used. This just leads to them instantly dying and a wasted round. So here's a general process to think of. Your initiators need to clear the way for your duelists to take space first. This can mean droning or dogging out spots where defenders can be playing, stunning common angles, or flashing for your duelists. After the initiators have used their utility, then your duelists should start pushing up. Just before your duelists start to enter the site, your smokes players should have their smokes placed on the site. Then your duelists should enter the site and the other agents should follow them up for trades. The purpose of knowing your order of entry is simply to make the most value out of your team's utility. If you do the wrong order of entry, then you risk wasting utility and dying when you shouldn't. For example, there is no need to die from a defender holding an aggressive angle. You should be first jump peeking, asking for a drone, flashing, or using some utility to push the defender back first. Another example is pushing onto a site before asking for smokes. Entering site with no smokes up exposes you to multiple angles and you risk dying when you shouldn't. There are 2 ways you can ensure the correct order of entry. The first is by communicating to your team. You can ask for a drone, then say where you want smokes, ask for flashes, and finally enter onto a site. If you know the order of entry, then you will know what utility to ask for. The second way is to understand your role. If you are an initiator, then make sure to tell your duelist to wait so you can use some utility for him. If you are a controller, then you need to be paying attention to the minimap and smoking relevant angles before your team entries. You should not be relying on someone to tell you when and where to smoke. If you are a duelist, then you should wait for your teammates to use utility that can help you enter instead of rushing in so fast. Just by knowing the order of entry, your team will automatically become more coordinated. In higher elos, players already know where and when they should use their utility, so they simply follow their team and use their utility at the right time even if no one asks them to. Now the fifth mistake is the most important tip to fix your in-game awareness and game sense, and this is to start looking at the minimap more often. I don't see low elo players doing enough of this. The minimap tells you where enemies are playing, what site they are pushing, or if your teammates need help. A strong understanding of how to use the minimap is the closest thing to having wall hacks. If you don't look at the minimap often, then you can't know what's going on in a round. This is why you don't expect players to be in certain places and are overall more clueless. The problem is that there is so much going on in a round that players don't understand when they should be looking at the minimap. The first step to using the minimap properly is to have the correct minimap settings. Make sure keep player centered is turned off, make the map size 1.2, and keep the zoom around 0.8. With these settings, you can see the entire map at all times. Now let's talk about when to look at the minimap. Looking at the minimap depends on what agent you are, if you're on attack or defense, and how you are playing. For example, if you are playing a duelist, you probably don't have time to look at the minimap at the start of the round because you are focused on trying to entry or get a first blood. However, if you are a controller, you should be looking at the minimap to know where enemies are playing on site, where to smoke, and following up your duelist to get trades. A general rule is that if I'm not looking at an angle to take a gunfight or use utility, then I'm looking at my minimap. So if I'm holding an angle but decide to safely rotate, then I'm looking at my minimap. If I'm playing passive on site fight or waiting to use utility, then I'm looking at my minimap. If I'm in a safe spot during a default, then I'm again looking at my minimap. Pay attention to your crosshair if you're in a position to fight, and pay attention to your minimap if you're both safe and doing nothing productive to help your team. You should never be looking at a wall with your eyes. Even if your character is looking at the wall, your eyes should be looking at the minimap. So even if you are playing in a passive position, you should at least look at the minimap instead of doing absolutely nothing. I also have the habit to look at the minimap whenever my teammates die or get a kill. This is super important, but again, make sure you are not peeking an angle when you look at the minimap. Now, there are two ways I use the minimap to increase my in-game awareness. The first is by using the process of elimination to guess where the enemies are playing. Most low elo players do not have this habit. You need to keep track of where you see enemies and predict where enemies could be. As the round plays out, keep track of what enemies were on which site, who could be close, and what players you haven't seen. For example, if you only saw 3 enemies pushing main, you should think that 2 enemies could be pushing from mid or lurking. Similarly, notice any gaps you have on your defensive setups. Whenever you're playing defense, pay attention to where your teammates are playing and rotating to. If there's a certain spot in the map that has been left empty, you need to assume that an enemy could have walked up there. And it's important that you tell that information to your team. That way you or your teammates can be mentally prepared for a gunfight and won't be caught off guard as often. And even if you are spectating, you should be looking at the minimap and give relevant callouts such as what enemies your teammates saw, what areas enemies could be playing, or what locations have not been cleared by your team. Looking at the minimap is a tough skill that you must work on to rank up. It takes time, but if you are looking at the minimap less than 30% of the time, you are definitely not using it right. And high elos, players are constantly looking at their minimap. Many times, they already know where to rotate or where to expect an enemy before their teammates call anything, as they've been paying attention to what was happening on their minimap. Remember to go pick up a shirt or hoodie from my store to directly support me. I hope fixing these mistakes will help you improve, and I'll see you in the next one.